Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Julia Duchesne, and I'm Senior Communications Advisor with Community Services with Government of Yukon. Today, we're going to be sharing a wildfire outlook and emergency preparedness update from government officials. First, we're going to be hearing from the Minister of Community Services, Richard Mostyn. Then we'll be hearing from Michael Smith, the Chief Meteorologist with Wildland Fire Management Yukon, and then Greg Blackjack, the Director of the Emergency Measures Organization within Government of Yukon. I'll pass it to the Minister to get started.
Thanks very much, Julia, and welcome and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Mostyn. I'm the Minister of Community Services, and it's great to be gathered here in the sunny traditional territories of the Wildland First Nation, the Tonquachuan Council, for an update on emergency preparedness and the seasonal wildfire outlook. 2024 has already tested our territory with flooding and telecommunications and a telecommunications outage. It has been all hands on deck as a result, but we're taking advantage of a somewhat quiet time at the moment to provide this update. This spring saw above average snowpack in the Klondike and Porcupine River basins. This meant the communities in the Klondike Valley and Old Crow faced a high flood risk during spring breakup. I'm proud of our work preparing for this flood risk, which involved working closely with the Trondikwichin, City of Dawson, the Wuntakwichin First Nation, and many local responders, utilities, and other partners. The response was definitely smoother than last year due to lessons learned. We continue to strengthen protocols between different branches and departments for flood and emergency response, including highways and public works, community services, health and social services, and environment. Now, during the middle of the flood system, the Yukon also experienced a telecommunications outage with cell, internet, and 911 service disrupted across the territory. The Yukon government's response was a team effort coordinated between first responders, government departments, and civil society. We're very thankful to those who worked together around the clock to restore our connectivity and everyone who worked so hard to keep Yukoners informed and connected during that difficult time. As a result of that event, departments across government have been updating business protocols and continuity plans to include a sustained telecommunication system so that there are strict procedures in place and departments have their own redundancies that are ready to deploy in the event of another outage, which has not happened that often, but is really challenging when it does. We've also been working closely with our response partners in the territory, including municipal and First Nation governments and utilities. This includes updating emergency plans and taking part in joint exercises, such as the wildfire-related tabletop exercise with the City of Whitehorse in May. For the past month, our government has been holding weekly emergency briefings with leaders across the territory. Chiefs, mayors, and officials from municipalities, First Nations, and others have been hearing directly from government branches involved in emergency response. I really thank our partners in First Nation and municipal governments for requesting and supporting these briefings. We're committed to ongoing transparency and dialogue with leaders across the Yukon about the emergencies affecting their communities. We and other governments across the Yukon are building a culture of preparedness in the territory. These efforts are helped by these weekly meetings. We will now be hearing from Mike Smith to my right from Wildland Fire Management, who will be discussing the current wildfire situation and the seasonal outlook for wildfires in the territory. Then we'll be hearing from Greg Blackjack about emergency responses so far this year. Greg is the Director of Emergency Measures Organization. I'm going to close with a reminder that as the weather heats up, now is the time to take action to prepare your family and property for wildfires. Emergency preparedness is a shared responsibility. The Yukon government is working hard to learn from every emergency and prepare for the future, and we ask all citizens to do the same. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike here, and he'll give you an update to the wildland fire situation in the territory, and then over to Greg. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Minister Mostyn. My name is Mike Smith. I'm the meteorologist with Yukon Wildland Fire Management. And I'll talk a little bit about the current fire situation and what we can say about the outlook for the rest of the season. So first, starting with where we're at right now today with the fires, we've been pretty fortunate to have, in the context, I guess, of the last couple decades, the first normal start of the fire year in a few years here. So We're sitting here at about 10 active fires in the territory, only 2 of which required any work by the fire crews, and 1 of which took a lot of rain near Dawson yesterday. So things are looking, for the time being, fairly good on the fire front. Moving on to the weather and the outlook. So as probably everybody here knows, we've been, a lot of the territory has been in sort of a cloudy, rainy, mixed bag of weather the past month or so. What we are seeing in the next few days after probably Saturday, Sunday is a return to a bit wider spread, warmer, sunnier, dry weather. So we are looking from a fire perspective about the fire danger rising a little bit slowly, but rising gradually through next week. So we expect we will start to see, again, fairly normal for June, a few more lightning fires out there. Um, that's what we're looking at for right now. Longer term, and I realized the federal government had released a national outlook here yesterday or the day before. What we're seeing jives, they didn't really speak too much of the Yukon, which is a good thing when they're speaking about fire danger. So we're looking at the best we can say is still normal. If we look, what we base that on mostly is how dry the forest fuels are right now and what we're seeing with weather coming up. So right now we do have a fairly dry spot through central Yukon, from around Destruction Bay through Carmack, Sparrow, Ross River, but the rest of the territory to the north and south, largely because of the overwinter snowpack, some rain we got last fall, is still not terribly dry. So despite the fact we have had fires in some of those areas, they're not burning deep. They're not burning the big fuels that make a fire turn into sort of a 2-month endeavor rather than a 2 or 3 day and wait for rain endeavor. So that's all to say, any starts that we do have in the next couple of weeks are not likely to be huge problems. As we get into later June and into July, August, we get a little bit less certain, other than we're going into longer days. We expect things will continue to dry out, at least gradually. But what we have as far as our weather seasonal kind of monthly outlooks is a slight risk of above normal temperatures in the Yukon territory, which doesn't tell us a whole bunch, but does tell us there's no real red flags out there for getting into a situation like we were last July, August, after several weeks of really hot and dry and no rain. So that's not what we're seeing right now. So the best we can really say is it should be a fairly normal season, getting into at least mid-late July, which we haven't seen in a while. So relative to past seasons, it will probably end up being a little bit slower of a fire season than we have been seeing. So as far as the current fire situation and outlook, that's where we're seeing things right now. Like the minister said, it's been nice to have a little bit of a slower period and a breathing room and some fires where our crews can actually do some good work rather than having to evacuate and stay out of the way. So from that, I'd move into echoing the minister's reminder that preparedness is everybody's job, and I'll speak from the fire perspective. Absolutely, any work that people can do in fire smarting their home or property, that makes a huge difference when and if fire crews do have to go on your property and try to put up structure protection. Properties that have piles of wood by the side of the house and wooden decks and garbage all over the place, they're going to be much more difficult to protect during the emergency than one that's had the yard cleaned out, has no real piles of combustible materials closer to the house. So please do keep that in mind. It makes our job a lot easier and safer and makes it much easier for us to protect your property if it comes to that. Moving on with a couple of more points. So with the fire smarting guidance, we do have on yukon.ca/wildfires quite a few tips and a lot of extra information on how to protect your home or property, some of the common terminologies, some of the best practices, including clearing your house and also even construction materials if you're looking to renovate or build a new house. These all make a huge difference with wildfires and reducing the risk to your home and property. As far as current condition, any fires of note, any closures, things like that, the Yukon Wildfire Hub that's been up for about 3 or 4 years now is still where we're displaying that information. That's accessible through yukon.ca/wildfires or directly at sure I get this right. Wildfires.service.yukon.ca will be your direct link to that. And that's a map-based system with extra information on any fires of note. You can see the current size, the current response type. So are the crews working on it or are we just monitoring the fire? And there's also contact information if you do need some extra information. Besides that, there's also the smoke modeling, which has become a fairly big topic the last few years. So there is a wildfire smoke model on that hub as well, where you can get an idea of whether or not you'll be impacted by heavier smoke for maybe a day or two or many days in a row, which again, luckily this year, that hasn't really been an issue in the territory for the most part. And finally, I'll finish off with thanking everybody who does report wildfires. We do hear from a lot of members of the public and the the industrial contractor aviation community. That is here how we hear about a lot of the wildfires. So we'd like to say thank you for everyone who does do that, and do please continue to report fires if you see them. Worst case, we know about it and can let you know about it, and best case, we get crews there faster. That fire information line, or sorry, fire reporting line, is toll free, 1-888-798-3473 or 798-FIRE as a thing to remember. And finally, if you do need extra information from any of the wildfire information officers, we've got a really good team that Julia used to be a part of as well. And they're always happy to answer questions, and they are reachable at 393-7415. And from that, I think I'll hand it over to Greg with EMO.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. I'm Greg Blackjack. I'm the Director of Emergency Measures Organization for Yukon Government, and I'm here to give an update on some of the events we've handled on behalf of Yukon Government this spring. As you know, the Emergency Measures Organization coordinates the government's response to large-scale and complex emergencies, and we also work year-round on emergency preparedness for the individuals and for governments alike. I'm going to start in the Klondike Valley with the Klondike River breakup. EMO issued a task number for this event on April 18th with the peak flood warning, peak high water and flood warnings coming on the 29th. So I brought that in to show you the days of preparation that went in before the event actually happened. We worked closely with Trondike-Witchin, the city of Dawson, and the rest of our emergency control group up in the Klondike Valley to get prepared and advance plan before we saw the ice break up. So that group includes entities such as Northwest Tel, Yukon Energy, ATCO, as well as Search and Rescue, and Yukon Amateur Radio Association. And yeah, we work together to prepare for potential flooding in the Klondike Valley. Being better prepared, we saw not as severe of a flooding event as we had last year, but that preparedness definitely takes the tension off of people, knowing that the governments were ready to respond. So we held an after-action review with our partners just to identify places where we could improve and how we'll change our response in future events. So over this past year, since last year's Klondike Valley flooding, we've been working closely with the city of Dawson and updating their emergency response plan. Our team was up there quite a bit this past winter. I think we held 3 different tabletops with them, and maybe 4 if I include Operation Nanook that they were a part of. Through all of this, improved collaboration and communication really helped the control group understand their roles in emergency management and allowed people to focus on their areas of jurisdiction and responsibilities. So it was a good response all around from the different levels of different authorities. And ongoing collaboration and communication are a priority for all of these agencies, and we'll continue with this working together, planning for events to create an annual cycle to keep emergency plans up to date and learn from previous events. So communication, as always, is identified in these events as an area we need to improve. We recognize that, and we're working on ways to better inform and educate residents about flood and emergency preparedness before an incident. And I bring that up because the city of Dawson, Trondike-Witchin, everyone in the emergency control group up in the Klondike Valley are doing a really good job, and they're actually handing out emergency information kits to every household up in the Klondike this past week. So people will be better informed going into emergencies with different info about how to prepare for floods, fires, emergency contact information, and just information on how to make your own emergency kit for your home. And yeah, in that one other thing we identified was just resource deployment was effective, but we can get better at it. We can be quicker getting our equipment out and staged in time. From there, I'll move on to the Porcupine River breakup in Old Crow. We issued our task number on April 11th, and I think the 17th of May was the flood watch. So we started early. We knew it was going to be a complicated plan and setup because of the remoteness of Old Crow, but we gave our team as much time as possible to get equipment and resources in place before we saw the ice break up. So YG, Vuntaq-Witchin First Nation, Northwest Tel, and ATCO all worked together through EMO in the months leading up to the breakup. Unified command team was made up of Vuntaq-Witchin First Nation and Government of Yukon staff, and they worked hard through the month of May to prepare an advanced plan for the ice breakup and possible flooding. And we're pretty proud of the work our governments did together to protect Old Crow. And I just want to say Vuntaq-Witchin showed strong leadership and a real leadership role for their people in emergency planning and preparing the community for the possibilities of a severe ice breakup. So I want to thank them. The Unified Command Team of Yukon Government and VGFN used flood forecasting data, on-site observations, as well as traditional knowledge to help inform their decision-making. And I also have to thank our private industry partners who assisted us in Old Crow. It wasn't an easy event to take on with location and all the logistic concerns, but we had companies like Total Track, Northwest Tel, Yukon Energy, and ATCO, and Porcupine, as well as Ketsa and TSL, that all assisted with the response up in Old Crow. And again, we'll be gathering the team between VGFN and Yukon government to do a after action / lessons learned meeting to take away from this event how we can respond better in future events. Then moving on to May 11th was the telecoms blackout. Fires in the Fort Nelson area caused damage to the fiber optic lines, which resulted in the loss of telecommunication services throughout the Yukon. Well, right across the north, but for us, the Yukon. This incident was a significant test for what our team at EMO learned through Operation Nanook and provided us with valuable lessons for future outages. I want to thank my staff and all the partners that responded quickly and came to EMO without us even being able to contact them. They just showed up knowing something was wrong. So with that, I have to especially include the Yukon Amateur Radio Association. They just showed up to help out, knowing something was off. So definitely a big thank you to them. And the Yukon Amateur Radio Association is a volunteer-run group of amateur radio enthusiasts who both build and operate radio repeaters for emergency communications, and just hobbyists, basically. But when we need them, they definitely answer the call of duty. And yeah, as soon as the comms outage hit, they were there faster than some of our staff to respond. So it's great to work with them and their enthusiasm. They basically helped us get message out to the public via radio and kept emergency services connected. And yeah. Leading up to this, EMO had practiced comms outages through many of our tabletop events. So we had certain scenarios that we had already worked with to learn from. Over the past 2 summers, we've added different systems such as Starlinks to help us maintain connectivity through different network outages. And this incident was a perfect example. And we're currently working on improving our backup systems and exploring how we can better utilize our alert ready system, even when cell phone service is down. And just a little bit about government preparedness. The EMO office has a duty officer that's on 24/7, 365 days a year. And all of our emergency management partners know they can contact that number if they need assistance in a response. We meet regularly with our response partners across the territory, but also throughout Canada through Public Safety Canada. And these relationships are important to maintain so we know who to contact and where to go to if help is needed in a response. During our Old Crow response this year, Public Safety Canada had a liaison officer in our ECC with us, working alongside monitoring the event. And we continue to work together with our other departments and response partners to evaluate and implement what we learned from our past incidents. And this includes updating our training for our staff within EMO. And on individual preparedness, it's Yukoners should take their own responsibility in being prepared for emergencies, understand the risks, make a plan, and make a kit for your household. Learn about the risks you face in your area and how to reduce your risks through actions like fire smarting and getting flood prepared. Plan for what you and your family would do in an emergency, and prepare a kit with basic supplies for every family member with your essential needs. Be prepared to be self-sufficient for at least 72 hours without power or running water. Put essentials like food, water, and medication in the kit. This makes it easy to grab and go when you need to leave the home quickly. And another good item in your emergency kit is either a battery-powered radio or a crank-powered radio in order to stay informed with emergency broadcasting. And throughout this season, we'll be sharing information on emergency preparedness. It'll be available on preparedyukon.ca. And as we go through this season, we'll keep you informed on any future events as they roll out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to our speakers. And sorry I didn't go over this earlier, but we've got a good amount of time for questions. So first we're going to have questions from the reporters in the room, and then I'm going to turn it over to the reporters on Zoom. So I'll go outlet by outlet, and there's one question and one follow-up question per outlet. And feel free to address your question to a specific speaker if you have a specific speaker in mind, or just to the room, and they can take their pick. For the folks in the room, we do have a mic at the back there. So please use that to say your question. And just a note that this briefing is being recorded and will be posted online, including the media questions. Okay, so in the room, we have Yukon News, the Yukon Star, and Radio Canada. So I'll go in that order. First up, Yukon News.
Question for Wildland Fire. What's normal? Can you describe what is a fairly normal season?
That's a good question. You put me on the spot. Yeah, normal for the Yukon would be a little over 100 fires during the fire season. Off the top of my head, I can't even give you area burned, but somewhere around 100,000 hectares, most of which would be in the wilderness. And I guess like the other part of what we characterize as normal would be that when we are getting lightning fires like we have in the past week or so, those fires don't immediately turn into conflagrations that are, beyond any ability to stop or fight, which has been the case frequently in the past 5, 10 years. This year, what we're seeing is, fires are starting and they're burning, but with a little bit of overnight cool temperatures, a little bit of rain, work from the fire crews, that we're actually able to make progress and stop those fires from burning. So I'd say the normal part is much more in terms of the forest field conditions. So how dry or not dry the dead trees and grasses are, which this year is closer to what you'd call normal. Hopefully that gives a bit more clarity.
And on floods, question for Greg, are we out of the woods on floods, or what's the status on that?
We monitor the water daily, and things are looking very nice this spring. We haven't seen the crazy rises that we have in the past few seasons, so we're looking like a normal spring. Yeah.
Thanks, Dana. Next up, the Yukon Star. Okay, no questions from the Star. Next up, Radio Canada.
Hello, both of my question are for Michael. You mentioned a fire closer to Dawson. Can you elaborate on that?
Certainly, yeah. It was started 3 days ago from a lightning strike just across the river from Dawson City. So it was pretty visible from the far side of the river. It was about 5 hectares. We used our air tankers and 2 fire crews and helicopters the first night. And then I think they called it about 5 hectares yesterday. The crews were on it. And then actually the rain moved in enough that they had to pull the crews off with the helicopters so they wouldn't get stuck there. So we're not sure how much rain it took, but yeah, it's I don't think it's out yet, but it's definitely very quiet.
And the fact that it's a more quiet time so far, has there been more of those prescribed fire being done to make sure that we're even more prepared?
Yeah, great question. There have been a few even in the past week. So we partnered with NND in the village of Mayo, or just NND, I guess, to do some grass burning around the old site across the river. That was last Thursday, I think. And then in Watson Lake, they were actually out at the airport and along Upper Yard doing some grass burning as well. So we haven't been doing any, big burns with, like huge hillsides or trees involved, but we are certainly using that opportunity to try to do some more grass burning, which is good both for the hazard reduction and this time of year, really good training opportunities for the fire crews as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to be moving to Zoom now, and it looks like we have Canadian Press and CBC on the Zoom. So we'll go in that order, and then I'll check to make sure that I haven't missed anybody. So Canadian Press.
Hi. I'm not sure whether this is a question for Mike or for the minister, but since the territory is expecting a more, quote, normal fire season, BC and other places are very much not, and it could get bad here. I wonder if it's too early to say whether you've had conversations with other jurisdictions about possibly sending people if you have to, and what kind of preparations, if anything, is happening with that.
Pass it over to Mike if I can. So I know that last weekend we had the Western Premiers Conference here, and I know that came up came up as a point of discussion. All provinces and territories in the national government have been talking about emergency preparedness certainly over the last year, and we're going to continue those discussions throughout the summer at our various federal, provincial, territorial meetings. As far as helping out and contributing assistance, I know Mike will have a lot more context and information for you, but I can assure you that the territory is, if we can spare the resources to help our neighbors and other places within the country or even in the continent, we have done so in the past and we will continue to do that. We have agreements with our partners across the continent, including certainly in Canada, to share resources when we're able to do so. And we will continue to honor those agreements, which is so very important to our nation in these times of a changing climate. And Mike, I'll pass it over to you for that.
Thank you, Minister. Yeah, just to add a bit more detail, I guess, as far as what we've done specifically this year, we have actually shared, we had 3 initial attack crews down in Fort Nelson earlier this month, assisting with the fires down there, and as well as a 20-person crew from First Nation Wildfire was in NWT for a 2-week tour as well. And then we've got a single division supervisor over in NWT. So yeah, those requests have been trickling in. I'd say on the without knowing any internal conversations at BC, from our perspective, we do speak, all the national fire agencies speak at least once per week on a preparedness call, which one of those things we discuss is incoming resource needs. And there really hasn't been a lot yet this year. It really peaked during the Fort Nelson fire and the fires that were affecting the highways in NWT and that burned our fiber line here. But aside from that, it's knock on wood, been very quiet for national requests for assistance. But that being said, if those requests come in, as the minister mentioned, we will definitely share our resources if we're able, and vice versa. I think everybody after last year knows that we can't do it all ourselves. So everybody's definitely going out of their way to help their neighbors when they can.
Great. My second question is for the minister, and I wanted to talk a bit about the telecommunications blackout. You mentioned how departments are updating their emergency plans for anything future that would happen similar to that. Can you give me some examples of what you mean by that? Like, are departments buying extra sat phones, or what does it actually look like to update your emergency plans to be prepared for a telecommunications blackout?
I will talk in macro terms, and then maybe Greg or Mike, probably Greg, may have some other information for you. But I'll start with the very highest level. When we came into government in 2017, we launched the redundant fiber project, which is coming to fruition this year, which is an attempt to remove our dependency on a single line out of the territory. So we spent tens of millions of dollars working with Northwest Tel and First Nation partners across the territory to make sure that we have a second line out of the territory that runs up the Dempster highway through Inuvik and into the Northwest Territories and actually completes a loop. So that will make our system, and that's coming online fairly soon, and that will make our telecommunications infrastructure far, far more robust. And then at a more granular level within the departments, within the Yukon government itself, I know that we're looking at new satellite technology like Starlink, and actually outfitting teams and other departments with Starlink technology. So we actually have satellite internet when needed, because that certainly did help in this latest telecommunications outage. And we also have procedures for emergency measures. I know that, well, Greg can get down to the specifics, but I know that the first responders and everybody else have procedures in place. When I was working in the compensation field, I know that we had individuals placed in street corners that could actually communicate when that happened several years ago. That was the last outage that I was involved in my other life. So there are all sorts of things that we're doing to make our communications systems more robust. We're looking at making sure we have appropriate power systems, like diesel generators that are maintained and fueled and can be hooked up. We have we've got the hobbyists, that we talked about earlier, who are actually becoming more integrated with our systems. And there are many other things that I'm sure that Greg at a more granular level, or perhaps Mike, can give you even better examples than I just did. I can put you on the spot, Greg.
No, that's okay. It's interesting how quickly the departments realize that even some things as simple as contactless if you don't keep those things up to date and you're in a situation where you can't get a hold of your staff, you definitely realize how important that is. Also just street addresses. If you don't know the street addresses, or your street address on your file was your original when you got hired with government, in a comms blackout like this, you're not able to find your staff. So making sure all of your staffing info is up to date. Departments definitely noticed what worked through our comms outage for us to keep our first responders connected and able to do their jobs. So they're looking at backup systems as well. Even to go down as far as radios and vehicles, having the simplest communications, like the minister mentioned, the Yukon Amateur Radio Association, getting back to the basics that work. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, and like I said, making sure you have a radio, a simple radio to be able to catch the emergency broadcast information that goes out. So even in some work areas, getting a radio that's not coming on online on the computer, getting back to the old radios to make sure you're able to catch that emergency information. So lots of updating work going on across government departments.
Okay, thank you. Do we have CBC on the line from Zoom? Any questions?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I think my questions mostly were answered, but I do have one, and I don't know if this is too difficult to answer, particularly because it's fairly early in the fire season here. But do you have any sense of whether or not, maybe over time even, we're seeing fewer human-caused fires? I know lightning-caused fires tend to be the majority of fires in the Yukon, but I wonder, just in recent years with more fires across the country, people more sensitive to the dangers, are we seeing any sort of change in the proportion, I guess, of human-caused wildfires as opposed to, lightning-caused fires?
That's a really good question. In terms of our statistics, just for fire cause, we see quite a bit of variation year to year, but there aren't really any trends, I guess, in terms of seeing increases or decreases in the number of fires that are caused by humans. If we look at that from an area burned, it gets a little bit skewed because we'll have fires like the Takini River Bridge fire last year that was human caused and was a relatively rare, large human caused fire. That throws the stats a little bit out of whack. So mostly I can just answer anecdotally, which is that especially when we compare ourselves to jurisdictions from the south, that we do overall see that fire use is mostly responsible or done responsibly in the Yukon here. We do have, the odd one where somebody makes in hindsight, not great decision, or burn piles or maybe not extinguished properly, but it's rare that we see just egregiously poor decisions when it comes to fires. So we'll see if that changes over time, but for now, knock on wood, that seems to hold fairly steady, that most people are pretty good, and even in cases when they're not and they're contacted, they're usually a lot more compliant and willing to mitigate what they've done versus some of my experience in other places where that's not always the case.
Follow-up question from CBC?
Yeah, just a second question. It's pretty simple, and I think you kind of answered it, but just to clarify, there are currently no Yukon firefighters elsewhere in the country right now?
There's one firefighter in NWT, and he is returning on Saturday. So, and then that will be it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and did I miss anybody on the Zoom? Doesn't sound like it. Thank you so much to everybody for coming here, to those in person. Thanks for coming to this very warm room to listen to this briefing, and to those on Zoom, thank you for tuning in from the Yukon NBC. As always, thanks for your role sharing vital information with Yukoners throughout the emergency season and throughout the year. We're really appreciative of that. And just a reminder that you can always call our fire information team at 393-7415 if you have any questions about what the fires are up to. Thank you so much, and no doubt you'll be hearing from us again before the end of the summer. Have a good day.
Yeah.